We continue now with our next inductee. This gentleman, I didn't even go over this with you, but I think I announced you once under a hood, under the name in Johnston, Rhode Island, as Dallas Austin. When he was competing in the ring, he has worked behind the scenes for MLW, Ring of Honor. I think you were like the conduit between Ring of Honor and New Japan. And now he is on the creative team for NXT. Our next inductee is Mr. George Carroll Jr. And here to induct Sean Gorman. Did I mention Wagner Brown and Ebony Blade could live in my neighborhood any friggin' day of the year? Welcome back the manager of champions, Sean Gorman.
It's late, and I'm already tired and fed up. See if I can finish canceling myself for the rest of the evening. Anyway, so this is a story about two New England boys who grew up in Massachusetts during the 1980s, a glorious, dreamlike decade that now seems like a long time ago in a country now far, far away. These two boys were actually the exact same age, both born in 1977. One grew up on the mean streets of Dorchester, Massachusetts, and the other, yeah, it's nothing to be proud of. And the other grew up on the not-so-mean streets of Medfield, Massachusetts. But anyway, these two kids grew up in very different environments around very different people, but in those two separate worlds, these two boys both shared a passion for this strange outsider thing called professional wrestling, which at the time was definitely not the way to win a popularity contest at school. Though separated by many miles on I-93, these two kids shared Saturday morning wrestling on Channel 56, LJN action figures, and of course, long before they even knew each other, they both shared that incredible experience of going to the old smoke-filled Boston Garden to see WWF house shows, when the drunken fistfights out in the stands were often just as good, if not better, than the fights inside the ring. Should I watch Moondog Rex wrestle CV Afi, or maybe watch these two drunken assholes from Dorchester punch each other's faces in aisle 29? I think I'm going to watch the two drunk guys. Now, here's the thing. In the 1980s, being a fan of professional wrestling wasn't like it is today. It wasn't hip, it wasn't cool, it wasn't trendy, or something that college kids watched ironically. And it was most definitely not a surefire way to win the affections of a girl at school. No, liking pro wrestling back in the day meant you were a nerd, a total loser, a complete outcast. And both these boys probably felt that way until they had the great fortune of meeting each other at an abandoned dance club in 2001. Y'all remember Sunfire Pro Wrestling? Yeah, me neither. Anyway, I remember meeting George quite well, and I'll never forget what he said to me that day. George came up to me and he said, "Hi, I'm George Carroll." I have all the AWA Remco action figures. And it occurred to me that day, something that remains true to this day. George Carroll likes pro wrestling a lot fucking more than I do, man. You know, that's why he's there and I'm here. And by there, I mean some backyard fed that George works for in Stamford, Connecticut. I don't know, I forget the name. Anyway, so yeah, that's how George and I met. And a lot of people probably don't know this, but George is the person I've known the longest in the business who is actually still in the business and actually has like health insurance and shit from the business. It's strange that we're still here, honestly, because as I stand here now remembering these two young guys sitting in that abandoned dance club, meeting for the first time, it's funny to think that these two fools who weren't even wrestlers would someday, in my not-so-humble opinion, go on to make a fairly big impact here in New England professional wrestling. And what would that impact be? Well, let's fast forward to somewhere around 2005. After that chance meeting back in 2001, George and I reconnected in Sheldon Goldberg's newly reformed New England Championship Wrestling, where George was now a booker and I was still the shithead manager in the red suit, insulting white trash and rundown VFWs. When NECW reformed, I was put together with the tag team of Die-Hard Eddie Edwards and DC Dillinger. And you know, something was happening. And here's a memory I quite vividly remember, which speaks to George's keen eye for talent. George was behind the camera in Framingham, Massachusetts, the night in 2005 when DC, Eddie, and I cut our very first promo ever together, and where DC and Eddie, unbeknownst to me, decided to douse me with about 10 gallons of Sierra Mist. They were celebrating a title match, and we cut an awesome promo in just one take. And George turned off the camera, he looked at the three of us, and he said, "Holy shit, I just got chills." And you know what? Something was happening. And honestly, we all kind of knew it, but I think George knew it the most. Now, listen, I am by no means a historian when it comes to New England pro wrestling. Nor do I want to be. That's for people like Sheldon or Mike Crockett who care about this stupid thing a lot more than I do. But good on them. Seriously, good on them. Someone needs to do it. But several years ago on social media, I was bored and I posed the idea that the glory years of New England independent wrestling occurred roughly somewhere between 2000 and 2010. Now, I will admit, I am totally biased when it comes to this opinion because obviously, well, those were the years that I was, with Sabotage, the most active, and we were running every weekend at the peak of our powers. And when I posed that question on social media, were these really the glory years of New England pro wrestling, 2000 to 2010? Everyone actually agreed, even people who weren't there at the time. I mean, look, let me just run through the talent that was here during that time. Eddie Edwards, Alicia Edwards, Nikki Rocks, DC Dillinger, Alex Arion, Brian Fury, Chase Del Monte, Wagner Brown, Todd Hansen, John Walters, and some broad named Sasha Moulin Rouge. I don't know what the hell. Anyway, the list goes on and on. Brian Fury, did I say him? I guess, yeah. Anyway, seriously, I could probably list off a dozen more names from that decade that either dominated this area or went on to a national level after they did. And even the talent itself aside, let's take a look at the actual business during that time. While George was booking for NECW, and I was the top heel manager. I can be a dick, as you all know. We were working shows all over New England to nearly packed houses almost every night of nearly every weekend. We were on legit cable television. We were doing promo spots on legit FM radio stations, and we were doing Angle on legit live television. Some shows, like the Hot Dog Safari at Suffolk Downs, were drawing legit crowds of 1,000 people or more. Eddie Edwards was on the cover of the Improper Bostonian, and the NECW heavyweight champion was legitimately on the cover of the Boston Herald. I mean, guys, let's face it, all ego and bragging aside, That had never happened before here in New England, and it hasn't happened since. And no disrespect to this younger generation, but quite frankly, that'll just never happen again. Sadly, those days are just kind of over. And I think I can speak for both myself and George here when I honestly say it was really cool, and it was a lot of fun. We had so much fun. Something was happening. It really was kind of a moment. Something had happened, and who was the main brainchild behind the scenes during those glory years? Well, it was George motherfucking Carroll. All right, now look, I try not to be delusional, all right? It's indie wrestling. I get it. I totally get it. It's a small world, but you know what? George and I did our best to light up that small world the best way that we could. As I've heard it said, bad talent cannot overcome good booking, and good talent cannot overcome bad booking. Well, in that 10-year period, New England found itself in the rarest of occasions to have had both. In short, New England wrestling during that time became a perfect storm, and somehow George and I found ourselves in the eye of the hurricane. And George was one of the key figures behind the camera and behind the curtain, making it all happen. I know. I was there, and I saw it. During that time, I got to see George's unbridled passion for the business. I got to see how fast he could hustle and how bad he wanted to succeed, but more importantly, how bad he wanted us all to succeed. Remember earlier when I said that George loves wrestling a lot more than I do? Well, that has always been true. George simply wanted it more than anyone I have ever met. And that's why he's there and I'm here. George would watch old wrestling tapes the same way a literary professor might analyze Chaucer or Shakespeare. He watched footage from the old territories in just the same way that I did to see what worked, what didn't, who got over, why, and when. George is a true student and scholar of the wrestling business, but unlike most people, George always studied the wrestling business with one goal in mind: to see what the fundamentals of the old school he could polish, refine, and rework just to make all of us in this new world succeed and be the best that we could possibly be. I have also seen George pay guys out of his own pocket just so he could give them the shot that they deserved, and I am here to tell everyone here tonight that George Carroll is, without question, one of the most generous and unselfish people I have ever known. And you know what? If I'm being honest, he's a far better man than I will ever be. Yeah, that's a shoot. I don't know. Let me put it to you this way. There's never going to be a Dark Side of the Ring episode about George Carroll. Myself or Eddie Edwards, on the other hand, yeah. And then Eddie Edwards died tragically in a Best Western surrounded by an Italian sub and a large cheese pizza. Fire! Anyway, I'd just like to say a few words about George Carroll, the man. When George and I reunited in NECW, we were talking backstage one night, and he said, so, Gorman, what are you into, like outside of wrestling? And I said, well, I like to read and write and snort cocaine off of brunette strippers named Destiny. And I said to George, what are you into? And he said, well, I really love my wife and my children, and I like to spend as much time with them as possible. Okay, nerd. So yeah, George and I are very different people, but we are alike in two very important ways. Number one, we love the business, specifically the psychology of it and what it had the potential to be. And number two, we were old school. We didn't mince words. We talked straight. Our word was our bond, and we were fiercely loyal to each other and to our friends. Now, let us not talk falsely here. So with all that being said, I am here tonight to say that in this fake world filled with so many imposters and frauds, I have, in a strange twist of fate, found one of the most honest and genuine people I have ever known. And lastly, let me just say this so I can dispel a popular myth. Over the years, a lot has been said, discussed, and written about George Carroll's enormous head. Yeah, that gigantic thing over there that Neptune and Venus are revolving around right now. There's speculation that George's head is so big that his left ear and his right ear are actually in different time zones. Apparently, George's head is so big that his passport photo says to be continued on page number 2. And George's head is so big that when he buys a car, a sunroof isn't optional, it's actually mandatory. But I'm here to tell you that all those anecdotes about George's big head are only half true. Well, it's true that George's big head has made it impossible for him to ever wear a turtleneck. The truth is this. I'm breaking myself up here. I pop myself. That's what I do. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Here's the truth. All the talk about George having a big head is only literal. In reality, George is one of the most selfless and humble people I have ever met. And in that way, his head is far from big. No matter where George has gone in the world of wrestling, he has always reached out to me to take me along with him. But the truth is, I just never wanted it as much as George did, but that's why he's there and I'm here. But that's fine. As time went on, and mostly because of my age, I simply never wanted to go to the places that George has eventually gone and now currently is. Like I said, George and I are very different, and we just wanted different things in life. This past April in Los Angeles during WrestleMania, George came up to the luxury suite. Yes, I was in a luxury suite. And he hung out with all of his New England boys for quite a while. And you know what? He didn't have to do that. A lot of guys wouldn't have done that, and it would have been understandable if he hadn't. But George made the time, and he and I sat and shot the shit and broke balls just like we had for so many years in that hot Quincy Armory. Honestly, George was the same guy I met 20 years ago in that abandoned dance club, all those years ago. And he's still the same guy I've always known. And as I sat there with George, high above in the open-air stadium in Los Angeles, with some of our closest friends from home, with the showcase of the Immortals playing out in real time in front of us, I was reminded of the words of a wise 20th century philosopher named Everlast, who said, "How do you know where you're going if you don't look back? What's the use of having ends if you lose all your friends?" George, it goes without saying that in the 20 years we've known each other, it's been, to coin a cliched phrase, one hell of a ride. We've seen many miles, and we've even had to straighten a few people out in parking lots, gangsta style. We've seen births, and sadly, we've seen deaths. We've seen many wrestlers come and go, along with a few wives and girlfriends to boot. We've seen marriages and divorces, tragedies and triumphs, and we've quite literally seen a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears. George Carroll knows where he's going. He knows where he's from, and he hasn't lost any of his friends. He's still the same fucking wise-ass, straight-talking kid from Dorchester with the Matt's Hole accent. And I am very, very proud to have worked with him for so many years, writing some amazing angles together that put a lot of smiles on the faces of a lot of fans. Just like the smiles that George and I once wore on our faces when we were those two kids from Dorchester and Medfield, perhaps sitting side by side in that old smoke-filled Boston garden. And I'm even more proud to call this big-headed fool my friend. And it is my honor and privilege tonight to induct the real manager of Sabotage, my good friend and compatriot, George Carroll, into the 2023 New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
All right, so I'm not really good with this stuff. I wrote a bunch of stuff down. You're probably going to think I'm name dropping, but I swear these people are real in my life. All right, so I think my journey in pro wrestling started 1975. You ask how I'm 46 years old, and it started then. So where my mom and dad met, Boston Garden event. Within 2 years, I was born. My mom said every time she would bring me to, every time she would go to wrestling when she was pregnant, I was moving around in her belly. And she said that's where my passion for this came from. And she's right. I've always loved wrestling. Anybody who's ever known me, I've always been the wrestling guy. In 1995, I met Perry Saturn. Started training at Champs Arena, got my ass kicked. Knuckles Nelson, I don't know where he was. He helped with that too. I wrestled for a few years in the NEWA, and thank you to Rocco D'Alessandro for giving a meathead kid a chance. I ended up getting hurt pretty seriously and still bothered by it to this day, but because I played with my wrestling figures like we all did, even though some of you don't want to admit it, you did. I got really creative with stuff, and that led me to try the other side of things because I just couldn't give it up. I just loved this thing. Anybody, Mr. Horowitz, you would know, they say that pro wrestling is really your mistress. And while I've never been the guy that did dirt on his wife or anything like that, there have been times where I have had to not be so faithful to my wife and miss things and my kids and really sacrifice. But I've been pretty blessed. Like Gorman said, one of the coolest times of my life, the most fun I've ever had in this business, and I know I'm at the highest level now, were those armory shows, going out afterwards, hanging out with the boys, figuring everything out, trying to get internet television when it was first a thing. I see people like Teddy and Steve Langer and Wagner and Chris Norman and Caleb and all these guys, Jose Perez, who looked out for me. And I'm completely blessed by what you guys gave me and helped me get to this point of Eddie Edwards in 2010 pushing me to go, hey, you know what, dude, you've pretty much done everything you've done here. Let me take you to Ring of Honor and introduce you to people. And people like Delirious, Hunter Johnston giving me a chance, and Jeff Jones pushing for me led to me to get 4 years with Ring of Honor, which I never thought I would get. That led to a deal with New Japan, where I was the U.S. Director of Operations for New Japan Pro Wrestling when they were trying to first come here. The first 2 shows you saw in the United States from them in 2017, I was integral and, again, blessed to be part of bringing to everybody. From there, I went to MLW, WWE. Matt Bloom, in particular, brought me down for a tryout week in 2018, and I was like, you know what, just stay in touch, kid, just stay in touch. I stayed in touch, and eventually in 2021, I get a text from Tommaso Ciampa. Hey, a 2-time Hall of Famer was asking about you. Now, I'm not gonna name drop, guys, I swear this is true. So I'm friends with Sean Waltman, who is a 2-time X-Pac, a 2-time Hall of Famer, and I go, oh, I was just talking to him on Sunday, that's cool, and he's like, no. Shawn Michaels was asking about you. 5 days later, I get a text. Hey, would you be willing to take a call with Shawn Michaels? Man, hell no, I'm not taking no call from Shawn Michaels. Who's it? Yes, sir, yes, yeah, I'll take that call, Shawn. Sure. Within 5 minutes of that phone call, my personal favorite performer of all time hired me. He's actually hired me twice now because I got let go in January of 2022. And I'm pretty blessed. So my journey has led me to where I am now. I am part of the creative team of NXT. I'm blessed to be able to write professional wrestling on television every Tuesday. We have a pay-per-view this Sunday, live on Peacock, for you guys to watch, 8 p.m. In fact, I got to fly to Austin tomorrow morning. So let's make this quick. I have to thank my best friend, my wife, Jennifer. I wouldn't be at this point in my career, my life, without you. We have 6 beautiful children, 2 amazing grandchildren, and I am not living a dream because of you. I'm living a beautiful reality. Thank you for your sacrifice. To Eddie Edwards, or as we affectionately call him, Shitty. DC Dillinger, Sean Gorman, Danny Jacks, Scott Corbett, Roach, Frazier, Steph, to all those people that were with us when this ride was the most fun. I wish I could rewind time and just keep living those moments. As unfair as that would be to the rest of my life, it was the most special time I've ever had in this business. To Roderick Strong, Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Bobby Fish, Tommaso Ciampa, I would not be in the position I am without you guys constantly pushing for me and saying my name and pushing me to just keep doing what I'm doing. Eventually, it's going to pay off. To Shawn Michaels, to Johnny Russo, to Andrea Concepcion, to Jim Smallman, to Nick Bonanno, the NXT creative team, to everybody down there, from Jeremy Borash to Ryan Katz. I appreciate you guys week in and week out for pushing me to keep doing this, to keep trying to be better. To my children and my grandchildren, who have sacrificed the most, the loss of time. Me missing your birthdays, to me not being so close all the time, I apologize in front of all of them and you. I'm sorry. I hope through the sacrifices I made, I inspire you to chase your dream and own your goals and achieve. Because if a meathead like I can do it, so can you. I'm going to wrap this up here by asking, if you think of me or my name comes up, that you remember me as an inner city street kid who led with his heart and never took this journey for granted. I'm blessed to be surrounded by people who wanted me to succeed, and I lived in fear of letting them down. I've been called many things that I'm proud of: husband, dad, son, pop-pop, friend. Today I can be called a Hall of Famer, and that's pretty damn sweet. Thank you.
Come on, get out.
Sean Gorman, ladies and gentlemen. 2 books available, Amazon.com. Let's continue.